Monster Buddies, the 23rd episode of Steven Universe, and by far one of the most important episodes of the entire series. I mentioned back in my review of Steven the Sword Fighter that the moment that Pearl poofed was the moment that I formed my first theory regarding Steven Universe. Now, I never posted that theory because it was confirmed almost as soon as I made it, since I was watching these episodes way after the fact of their airing. But to go over what that theory was, when I saw Pearl poof in a similar manner to what I at the time was calling gem monsters, it made me wonder if perhaps these gem monsters were biologically effectively identical to gems, and in this episode we see confirmation that that's basically true. Yes, they're more animalistic, but they definitely have the same biological properties. The plot of this episode, I could deconstruct the plot of this episode forever, but I'm going to be talking about the plot of this episode very heavily in an upcoming theory, so I'm going to keep it relatively simple here. The gems take Steven to this ice cave to recover some artifact. We don't know what it is yet. And the cave starts to collapse from a battle with what seems to be an ice-based corrupted gem, and Garnet, seeing no other option to protect Steven, bubbles him and sends him back to the temple. He ends up breaking the bubble from the inside out and accidentally frees the centipedal mother. And this is the first interesting thing about this episode. We see as the centipedal reforms, it can see how scared Steven is of it and chooses to take on a less threatening form. We had never seen this kind of behavior from corrupted gems before. Then it is afraid of Steven, and Steven is actually able to calm it down, which is, again, something we had never seen from these corrupted gems before. But the crystal gems get back relatively soon after this, and they attack the centipedal, and Garnet is bearing down on it. And I want you guys to take a look at this moment here really quick, because it seems a little odd to me. Garnet is one of the fastest and strongest gems with some of the most varied attack possibilities of all of the crystal gems. And yet she bears down on this thing without attacking it, long enough for Steven to have a brief dialogue with Pearl, and then step in front of Garnet and plead for the safety of the creature. Something doesn't seem quite right there, and that's part of what I'll be talking about in the upcoming theory, but just keep that in mind. Really let that simmer, because it has some pretty interesting connotations. Anyway, Steven wants to try to help this thing. He wants to try to train it. And so they take it outside of his house down by the beach, and he starts trying to train it. He starts trying to build a bond with it by offering it food. And I'm actually really excited about this, he's attacked by a bird. So our attacked by a bird counter gets to go up by 1. The bird tries to get the chips that Steven was feeding to the centipedal, and it accidentally bites his finger. And the centipedal actually stands up for him, and they have a little bit of Pokemon battle, because this episode is obviously a parody of Pokemon. And through this, Steven is able to learn how to direct the centipedal and command it to attack. So he claims that it's all trained up, and to be perfectly fair, it seems like it is actually pretty trained up at this point, and takes it into the house to show to the gems, and he shows how he is able to get it to now shoot acid on command, acid that can burn through practically anything, and the gems get the idea of using the acid to tunnel through the ice cave without causing more cave-ins. And Pearl, through the whole thing, she is convinced this is a terrible idea, and even as the centipedal proves very effective helping them reach their goal, her opinion doesn't really change. They reach the final chamber where the artifact they're after, the shooting star, which is literally a miniature star that you shoot at things, is in this kind of pit of ice and water that is the only thing that can keep it super cool. It's actually said that even Garnet's natural heat resistance isn't enough to protect her. She needs her gauntlets as well. And then that's when things go bad. She summons her gauntlets, that action spooks the centipedal, and they start to fight, and it's absolutely brutal. It was like watching a puppy get kicked around. It was tough, it was hard to watch, and it was meant to be, clearly. Because it's at this point in the series where they're wanting us to feel sympathetic towards the gem monsters now. They want us to start to piece together that these things used to be people, so that thought starts to simmer in the back of our minds, and the big reveal that we get in a couple of episodes has the intended effect. But anyway, Steven, despite everything, despite the fact that all 3 of the other gems have their weapons out and have been attacking this thing, actually manages to get it to calm down, and you can see that the bond between them has really increased. If you watch earlier, you can see that the centipedal stopped taking food from him. It was just helping to help. And now he's able to calm it down when it's in a battle state. However, immediately after this happens, which is it, a stalagmite or a stalactite, whichever one hangs from the ceiling of the cave, it falls. It's going to hit Steven, and the centipede actually pushes him out of the way and gets poofed in the process. It's this really touching moment because you can see this wasn't just him having trained an animal. He had actually started to bring part of what this thing used to be back to the surface. It was thinking for itself again. It made the choice to help him, and that's incredibly meaningful. And this is when we get the reveal from Garnet that Rose tried to help the corrupted gems, but her powers weren't able to heal them. What exactly this means we can only speculate at. I've given you guys my take on it in my corrupted gems theory, but there are plenty of other ways to interpret this, and I wouldn't be surprised if any one of them turns out to be true. They're all incredibly likely. Point being, something caused these corrupted gems to become the way they are, and not even Rose, as powerful as she was able to fix that. But it's possible that Steven just might be able to do that. He might be able to do something that Rose never could. And Garnet definitely seems like she feels that this is a possibility, that she really believes he can do this. Let that simmer in the back of your mind a little bit too. Just saying. And this is also when we learn that Steven can actually bubble gems. He's holding the Centipedal's gem, and he bubbles it and sends it back to the temple himself, which is something that, based on their reactions, the other gems clearly never taught him. And this is actually kind of a big deal because the working theory is that Rose actually developed the process of bubbling gems so that they wouldn't have to shatter the corrupted gems who were attacking at no real fault of their own. This means that Steven tapped into a power that was originally an exclusive part of Rose. He made a real connection with her. I think that's pretty significant. And it closes out with this really cute scene where he sends the bag of chips back to the temple as well to sit there with Centipedal and, I guess, offer her what little comfort he can. It was a cute ending to what was overall a pretty cute episode with some really disturbing moments and some really thought-provoking additions to the lore. It is absolutely one of my favorite episodes of the show. This is pretty far up there on my list of my favorite episodes of the show, and it is absolutely one of the all-time most important episodes in terms of the lore, in terms of character development, and in terms of setup, because now it looks like we're going to be getting a sequel to this episode sometime during the second half of Season 2. If you are a Steven Universe fan and you have not seen this episode, much like Coach Steven earlier this week, you absolutely have to watch it. It is that important. Even if you already know all of these things that are introduced in this episode, even if you've been told them or heard them somewhere else or read them somewhere, actually seeing this is important. It's an important part of watching this series because the way that it is presented here in this episode, it leaves this really huge kind of impact. This is not an episode that I am ever going to forget. But guys, what did you think of this episode? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And real quick before I go, I do want to remind you guys to keep an eye on your sub boxes this weekend because at some point I will be reviewing the new Star Wars movie. I'm very excited about it. At the time that this episode went up, there's a very good chance that I've already gone and seen it. And if you guys are interested in my opinion on the movie, that's something you're not going to want to miss. Either way though, this has been AJ22 and I will talk to you guys sometime this weekend.